The verbal NDA has been lifted on the Ashes of Creation Alpha 1 test that I took part in over the weekend of May the 14th, so I'm excited to share my experience and thoughts with you. It's important to bear in mind that the Alpha 1 test was not for testing content, it was standing up core systems in a bare bones state, vetting technical architectures, and allowing the community to assist with bug squishing and optimization. The footage you're going to see here in the background of this video is going to be the same stuff that you see in the developer update, so if you stay up to date and current with those, you won't see anything brand new here, but if not, stick around and you might see some cool stuff at the same time as hearing about my experiences. With that said, let's dive into it. So my initial feeling going into the game was just the same as booting up an early access Steam game and coming to terms with all the levels of polish associated with early access. Of course, I pinched myself and remembered this isn't early access, this is alpha. And after spending 16 hours testing, I couldn't believe the amount of fun I was having with the game. The first night of testing, servers were experiencing rubber banding issues that made things incredibly painful for testing, and eventually this did settle down, but the devs also reacted so fast to implement short-term fixes whilst working on a more stable hotfix, which was then in place for the next night and resolved the majority of rubber band issues. I was incredibly impressed with the performance from the networking team. Speaking of performance, let's talk about FPS. So overall, the client was very smooth. When the servers were overloaded, there was obviously an impact on performance, but once things settled, I managed to keep 60 frames per second constantly, even in moments where there was at least 50 plus players on screen, which is a brilliant indicator of how the Ashes tech is progressing considering that this is alpha. Although the performance did dip a bit for sure when we had an event on the server Cal where Steven himself, or at least somebody named GM Steven, used their powers to fight at least 100 players or more at once. So I'm going to be quite similar to the general consensus amongst the Alpha 1 testers that this was an unbelievable amount of fun for an alpha considering the presence of bugs and the fact that Alpha 1 is of course nowhere near the finished article. The sense of exploration, wonder and community was brilliant and in my opinion helped along by some of the less polished and traditional executions of game systems that Ashes is going for. Let me give you an example. The quest tracker and the map are quite finicky at the moment. I'm unsure if this is down to a design choice, bugs or a combination of both, but I would highlight a quest as my current objective, which on screen from your standard character pilot view would show a brief blue marker that was quite difficult to spot that would indicate the direction you need to go for the quest. Sometimes this marker showed up, others it didn't, and if you opened your map and used the quest log alongside it to select your quest, it would place a small red dot on the map that would indicate where you need to go. Again, sometimes this would show and sometimes it wouldn't. So due to the inconsistency and the vaguity of this, you would end up heading in the general direction of your quest objective. And naturally, along the way, you would check every nook and cranny, explore the environment, fighting the new monsters that you'd encounter, and eventually band together with other players who were doing the same thing. Oh, you're looking for a cave? Yeah, I think it's over this way. You want to party up? That kind of deal. And of course, from there, your adventure would continue, aided by shared quest progress and quest item nodes being instanced to the individual so that you wouldn't end up disbanding because you couldn't progress at the same time because someone else has taken your node, you've only got 3 left, they've got 5 to go, that kind of deal. And just to riff on this point, the quest I'm talking about had you go into a cave and collect some flowers. These flowers were well hidden and required a bit of teamwork and parkour to figure out. It reminded me of the way that Guild Wars 2's jumping puzzles work, but not quite as intricate because obviously that's a finished product. I hope this approach stays and evolves into more elaborate examples in the future of Ashes. And now a big one that I want to talk about, which is combat, I was a little bit concerned with at first. The video footage that we've seen so far made it seem like Ashes would be a slower version of ESO's system, but I was pleasantly surprised after spending time with the 3 archetypes available being the tank, cleric and mage, that this isn't quite the case. So the tank is your warrior, guardian style approach of weapon strikes, bleeds, AoE threat generation and damage mitigation skills, mage doing mage stuff, throwing fireballs, lava on the ground, teleports, drain mana, and the cleric being a melee healer hybrid that could both deal damage in close quarters and ranged whilst throwing various healing spells out. So I'm going to try and explain my thoughts on combat at the moment with the pros and cons list, but I'm pretty sure that testing combat wasn't exactly high on the list of priorities for this test event. Thankfully, it was implemented with enough polish to not create a really bad first impression, but there is still work to be done. So for the pros, we got the spells and abilities that felt quite weighty and impactful across the board, with only a couple feeling a bit empty and lackluster. The abilities are cool, and at the moment there wasn't anything completely breathtaking or reinventing the wheel, but it also doesn't need to. The toolkit that it gave you was familiar enough that you knew what you could do and what you could combo together, how it looked, sounded, and how it all felt was pretty good. And after getting used to the controls and the flow of combat, it didn't feel too slow or badly paced at all. Also, monster abilities were not telegraphed by a cast bar. Instead, you get used to the attack pattern and the animation tells that inform you of what's coming your way, if you need to get out of range, dodge roll, knock or stun, that kind of deal. Which then brings me onto the cons, because the lack of enemy ability cast bar is going to be a big change for some people, and if there isn't an option to enable cast bars for enemies in the future, I suspect it might even be a deal breaker as well for some. Years of training in tab target MMOs will be challenged, and the tab target action hybrid style that Ashes is going for currently feels a little bit disjointed. There are two modes of view for combat, which is like the classic tab target style, and then Ashes action combat style. The easiest way for me to describe the action combat camera is to reference the Dungeons & Dragons online MMO. It sometimes felt like it took away from the impactful animation abilities, and instead of introducing an action feel, it actually made combat feel a bit janky, easy to miss your target, dodge roll didn't actually seem to evade anything, and the enemy, of course, being an NPC, was still hot on your character, landing every hit and sticking to your position with ease. Something else I have an issue with that others might not is the tank class using mana as their primary resource to cast abilities. Now, I might not be able to scratch with my knowledge of Ashes, so I could be completely wrong here, and this might be something that is likely going to be changed or tweaked moving forwards, but after engaging a few enemies in a row or all at once, you can go out of mana pretty quickly and then you're dead in the water. It just becomes incredibly boring to play. As a fan of the warrior rage system from WoW, this was a real struggle for me, which is a shame because I enjoy the tank archetype the most of the three. That brings us nicely onto range combat, which seems a little favored over melee at the moment. Sure, the tank had a few abilities that you could cast from range, like you could charge in and close the distance, or you could use like a scorpion, get over here to pull enemies in, but there were times when enemies would simply aggro you before you even got close enough to do that. But there were times when enemies would simply aggro whilst you're in range to cast, so they would queue up their attack animation and then hit you the moment that you were in range, which was a little bit frustrating considering it kind of felt like you were about to get the drop on them and then the game just kind of took that away from you. It also meant that range classes like Mage can easily melt enemies before they even get close. So I briefly mentioned it a moment ago, and I'd like to expand as well, that the dodge roll seems to be completely busted. The dodge is on a cooldown that felt a little bit too long and punishing, making those badly timed rolls throw you off time for the next dodgeable attack, meaning you'd have to commit to tanking the next blow to be in the chance of being able to try and dodge the next one, which if you ended up pulling off correctly, still had you take damage. That's obviously a bug and needs some work. I've reported it and hopefully it'll be fixed moving forwards or changed and tweaked because if there is action combat and you can't properly execute and evade of mechanics, you're gonna have a bad time. So those issues combined led to a feeling of general clunkiness with combat most of the time, but when things did line up properly, they were very enjoyable. And then moving away from combat onto the environment, I have to say the art team at Ashes are amazing. So the test is taking place on an alpha island, which, as you'd imagine, is not actually a slice of the existing world map. So to ensure testers are able to experience more than just the starting zone, the Alpha Island itself is pretty big and spans several different biomes, starting in like green rolling hills that transition into a wooded forest area, volcanic region, a red rock desert-esque biome that reminded me of the Barrens in WoW with spots of oasis and vegetation here and there, and like a tropical or jungle biome that I'm sure Stephen and co will kill me for mixing up because they've previously stated that they are two separate biomes, but hey, you get the point by now. We've got lots to explore, lots of examples of environments, the vegetation that comes with it, cave systems, enemy types, ruins, and it was all such high quality, gorgeous stuff that I am blown away. Coupled with the Unreal Engine, lighting, spell effects, the texture work, it's already shaping up to be a top tier MMO and we're in alpha, so huge props to the art team. The node system was in play, and unfortunately due to the amount of time that I had personally to test, coupled with choosing a lower population realm for the first 2 nights of testing, I didn't get to personally contribute to the progression of settlements myself very much. But I did get to see the before and after, which was so cool to experience in game. Even at this early stage, it really gives the world a sense of wonder and being alive. A small camp-like settlement growing and developing with walls, houses, town halls, vendors. I mean, it really sets the stage for the community and the massively multiplayer elements of Ashes to shine. And for me, I didn't expect this, but this ends up being a feature that I am most excited for with Ashes. There was also a bit of crafting that started off being a real pain to get along with because I experienced a lot of crashes and bugs that lost me resources that genuinely took some time to discover and collect, so it left a little bit of a sour taste, but I'm an alpha tester and I've got to crack on with it, and eventually it began to feel like a real sense of achievement once you got going with things. Just to give you an idea of how it works at the moment, to gather a node such as a herb, wood, ore, etc., you need to have the correct tool in your backpack to harvest that type, so like a pickaxe to mine stone. And if you want to mine platinum, you use a diamond axe. Not that the names that I just said are in-game, but you get the point. So you can get the base gathering equipment from the merchant, and some merchants also sell the next level up of that gathering equipment type to allow you to gather higher level rarity materials. And you can also get the blueprints to allow allow you to craft the next level up of those gathering items as well yourself. And so to acquire those materials, you need to go exploring. There is of course a logical approach to figuring out where these nodes might be. Trees are going to be in the woods and whatnot, but you need to go out and find these yourselves, which fed back into the gameplay loop I mentioned before with the questing and grouping up with other people. Except with gathering, you can lose a node to another player, meaning it's more about competition than cooperation. For example, I was struggling to find stone to gather for completing a crafting quest, and there was a player in the forge in front of me who was on the same quest. I asked where they got the stone, and they wouldn't say. They summoned their horse and rode off. But I had a horse of my own too, so I followed from a distance to wherever they were headed and found the stone that they had been mining, and then I began to mine everything in sight as payback. But having the game be a little bit vague and not very hand-holdy meant that you could explore and discover your own spots for whatever resource you're trying to hunt down and farm. Sure, with YouTube and other websites this would likely diminish after the full release of Ashes, but the point still stands that the game is designed with the purpose of driving a sense of wonder and exploration that rewards you for playing, trying new things, checking out each quest, reading the quest text for more details and hints. Ashes has managed to achieve a level of immersion in an alpha that I haven't felt since the first time I played The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. It really is that kind of sense of wonder of you start off in a cell, you escape out, and the possibilities are endless. So speaking of mounts, I also didn't manage to experience any mounted combat in the test, and I'm unsure if this is either tied to more expensive mounts from the merchant, which I could only afford a really cheap one at the base level, or maybe it isn't even part of the test yet. And another thing that puts a great emphasis on the value of the mounts is the lack of fast travel in Ashes, which is a design choice and not a feature that will be changed moving forwards. There's no hearthstones, there's no quick recall, you need to go back to town, you better get walking. This again feeds back into the gameplay loop that I think is already very apparent in Ashes. You play the game, you experience the world as it lives and grows, meaning your sense of investment and immersion goes from strength to strength. This is honestly something I've always wanted from the modern MMOs, and specifically from World of Warcraft, that I haven't experienced since the days of Star Wars Galaxies. I had an absolute blast with the Alpha 1 test, despite the bugs that of course you should expect considering that's what I'm there to help iron out. And the game is in such an early stage with a frankly limited amount of things to do, and combat being in an okay but obviously not finished state for someone who, by the way, is more of a combat orientated player than I am a gatherer. When I say I fell in love with exploration, gathering, and the progression of the world, it's an indicator that Ashes is on track to bring that old school core principle and design philosophy magic back to the modern MMO audience. It really does feel like the old school skeleton and purpose is lying underneath a modern, updated surface, and I can't wait to see more. So that's it for my thoughts, guys. I'm an Alpha 1 backer, and I'll be covering all tests moving forwards in the Ashes development lifecycle. I'll share whatever I can within the restrictions of the NDA with you, and of course, I'll be creating more content here on the YouTube channel and streaming the NDA-free month-long test in July. So like and subscribe to see more videos. Follow over on Twitch to catch me live, and hopefully I will see you in the world of Vera soon. Take care.